Hello friends, welcome to Altenew's YouTube channel. It's Noreen here with you today, and I have 3 cards to share with you that demonstrate some fun techniques, including using Altenew's new masking paper, doing some ink blending, and then some watercoloring with the watercolor brush markers. In particular, the masking and ink blending technique that I want to share is a way to achieve these transparent looking glass vases that are layered over top of each other. So let's get started. Now, when I say using Altenew masking paper, mine hadn't actually arrived yet when I was doing this project, but I wanted to highlight for you that Altenew has masking paper now in their shop, and it allows you to do some very cool techniques such as what I'm showing you today. I used the masks to help me position the stamps for a 3 vase arrangement. I placed the first vase stamp in the middle, slightly lower than the 2 on either side, and then I removed all 3 masks and stamped the middle vase. Once more, using the masks as a guide, I positioned the outer 2 stamps on the door of my Misty, and then I replaced the mask on the already stamped middle vase. I inked up my stamps and stamped once over that middle mask. Then I removed the mask and stamped again without re-inking to achieve that fainter second generation stamped line that suggests transparency. Now, just to keep things interesting, we're going to move on to coloring the flowers and leaves, and we'll go back to the ink blending of the vases shortly. So at this point, I stamped all the various images in the Poppy Garden stamp set and the Flower Garden stamp set onto Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. I used that cardstock because, as the name suggests, it has a smoother finish that I almost prefer over watercolor paper for the watercolor brush markers because of the way the ink just flows and blends on its own. So for the leaves, I use a base of green typically, and then I add in some turquoise, sometimes some lime yellow green at other times, just to let them blend and look really bright and dynamic. I did a project recently where I colored a couple of blooms in a rainbow fashion similar to what I'm doing here, and I just really loved the look, and I told myself I'm going to go back and try this again. So that's what I'm doing today. There are no flowers like this in nature, sadly, but they were a lot of fun to do, and so I just chose out of the Altenew water brush markers some of the bright colors that created a rainbow, and I stuck pretty much to the rainbow order as I went around the flower. I started by laying down the intense pigment at the center of the flower and then using a wet brush to draw that color out to the edges of the petals. I didn't worry about staying in the lines or getting too close to the lines. It's a very kind of slapdash technique, and once they're finished and cut out and arranged on a card, it's not really obvious. They don't appear to be messy or anything like that. They're just a really fun, loose style. One thing I wanted to point out about the water brush markers is, as you're watching, you will see on occasion a couple of them were blobbing. I have traveled with these water brush pens actually quite a few miles, and a lot of elevation loss and gain, and I find that sometimes that happens where they get pressure buildup in them, and so this was the first time that I was using them after arriving at my destination, and that's when I noticed that they're kind of bad for that. But it's not a problem. It's something you just have a wet paintbrush nearby, and you soak up the extra pigment with what's called a thirsty brush and carry on. Not a big deal. Some of the main colors of the water brush markers that I'm using for these flowers include ultramarine, lagoon, grass field, hydrangea, warm sunshine, fuchsia, aqualicious, and lime. Those are all really pretty colors when used together. So I'm just going to turn on some music now and let you watch the remainder of the painting process as well as some of the fussy cutting. So moving along, I am now going to add some color, lots and lots of color, to the vases. Now is when I am going to use the outside or negative portions of those masked cuts. And as you can tell by the color that's already on them, I've already done a couple of other cards just to kind of figure out how it would all work. I'm using these small ink blending tools by Altenew. I love these tools, both the large and the small ones. And I used fuchsia ink on the middle vase. Now I'm lining up the second of the vases on the outside, overlapping the pink vase so that I'm going to get a third color that is a blend of the fuchsia and the second color. I added a strip of washi tape on the edge because I wasn't careful when I stamped down my the tall narrow vase, and the outside line was a little bit wonky. Anyway, not a hard thing to fix. And I'm using Persian blue ink on this vase, inking more heavily at the bottom, and as you can see I'm going to do a little bit of an adjustment there just where I missed that bottom section, inking, blending more ink over top, and it just fades into the ink that's already there. Finally, I'm lining up the third and last of the negative portions of the masks for this card front, and I'm using Lagoon ink this time to ink blend all around it. I'm trying to be conscious with my ink blending of leaving a highlight spot, so I tend to go in a circle around the whole jar or vase, leaving a lighter spot in the center. I'm also trying to be mindful of the edge of my masking paper and not get too crazy and get ink overlapping onto the outside where I don't want it. And when I remove that last mask, you'll see the two overlapped areas and the different shades that you get where you've got your ink blended over another color. So now I have a whole array of fun watercolor painted colored blooms and leaves that I've fussy cut, and I'm just going to mess around with them and make arrangements for all the vases on my card fronts. There is a stem stamp in the Poppy Garden stamp set, but it was buried under a bunch of product on my desk, and frankly it just seemed as quick and easy to do it with a Sharpie marker. For this first card, I fussy cut around the three vases as well, because in my carelessness I had actually ink blended over the lines of my masking paper and got ink where I didn't want it, like I was warning against earlier. So I just fussy cut it with my scissors, and now I'm going to put it on some pale blue polka dot patterned paper. I trimmed the edges all around on an A2 sized card front, and I'm just going to adhere that to my folded card base, and then I will glue down the vases and the bloom on top of that. I stamped a sentiment from the Versatile Vases 2 stamp set right onto the vases, and now I'm using some press and seal to hold a bloom and a couple of leaves in place while I position them and adhere them to the front of the card. And that's card number 1 complete. The second card is much the same as the first. However, I did want to just point out that the color order of the vases is sort of rainbow as well. And where for example, the pink vase overlapped with the yellow vase, I did actually use some orange ink just to kind of emphasize those overlap shades, which you would get normally in nature, but I just wanted to give some extra help. So I've arranged more of the colored and fussy cut blooms, and I'm using more of the press and seal to hold them in position while I glue them down. I've added more stems, and I'm using an Altenew artist marker in green, frayed leaf I believe it is, just to color in those stems. I'm using a liquid adhesive to glue the individual pieces down because they give just a little bit more wiggle room in terms of time to move things around if you don't have them positioned perfectly. I used a narrow strip sentiment from the Poppy Garden stamp set that says, "I've been thinking of you." And I'm stamping it on heavyweight black cardstock with Altenew embossing ink and heat setting with white embossing powder. At home I keep my embossing powder in sandwich containers so that it's easier to pour the embossing powder on. But when I'm traveling, I'm crafting on a shoestring, what you call it? Anyway, a piece of scrap paper works just fine for the purpose, and it makes for easy cleanup. So now I'm just trimming that sentiment strip down and going to get ready to glue it onto my card front. I wanted to point out to you the new Altenew bone folder. That's what I'm using to fold my card front. But from this point on, the assembly of the last 2 cards is fairly similar to the first one and nothing really out of the ordinary. So I'm going to just put some more music on and let it take you to the end of the video. So there you are, 3 completed cards, all variations on the same technique, theme, and with lots of bright, cheerful color. If you liked this video, there are more like it uploaded often on the Altenew YouTube channel, so please click subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything new. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.